Hello, Frank. Nice to meet you. Thank you very much for the time with the interview.
Thank you.
First question, which feelings came into your mind when you saw the Proud Boys attacking the Capitol? Were you shocked, or was this form of assault expected?
The level of it kind of surprised me a little bit. I expected them to do something. I expected there to be a fairly large presence there, and that is never good because these are a bunch of fairly highly energized, violent people in general. And so it was surprising to me what they got away with so quickly, though, particularly when you look at how other demonstrations in the area have been treated. You know, we've come to sort of assume that our government is protected, you know, that's the most protected building in the world. And as it turned out, they just waltzed right in like it was a museum, you know. It was that to me was very, very shocking, the level of access that they were granted so quickly.
You're talking about, for example, the Black Lives Matters movement. What do you think? What would have happened if BLM was attacking the Capitol?
I think there would have been bloodshed, but I don't think they would have even gotten close. I mean, the last time Black Lives Matters protested in Washington, D.C., peacefully protested in Washington, D.C., it was like a military encampment there. The streets were all blocked out days before. It was military gear and unmarked military gear everywhere, automatic weapons pointed at them all the time. Whereas this time it was a bunch of, they look like what we call rent-a-cops, like security guards who just standing around and let them get away with it. It was really appalling.
At least 4 people have been killed. The US and the whole world is shocked. What was the reaction of relatives or friends in the United States?
It was kind of hard because there's a big time zone difference between me here, so I was up pretty late watching it. But we were all just like, WTF, I mean, it's like, it was, but, I also have a fairly liberal, progressive, family. There's not a lot of Trumpers in my circle, and so we were all just like, what the hell, I mean, but we've been shell shocked into, such a state that, it's like there's 2 weeks left and you think, oh, what could he possibly do in the next 2 weeks? And I'm like, yeah, don't say that, he could start a freaking nuclear war, I mean, it's like, it just seems that whatever the worst possible impulse, whatever the worst possible reaction to something, he does, and we've come to expect that. And so there was some sense of that when I talked to people yesterday with my family and stuff. Like, yeah, we all knew this was going to happen, but I think the level of access to this place was really shocking.
What do you think about Donald Trump's message yesterday when he told his beloved supporters to go home peacefully?
It was worthless. It was, I mean, the reason they're protesting is because he's in denial. This isn't about ideology or policy or anything. This is about believing a lie. And as long as he believes the lie and they are aligned with him in terms of his beliefs about race and his beliefs about, a bunch of other crap, patriarchy, misogyny, and racism, that's their core of their shared beliefs. So as long as he's in denial and he's telling them to go, protest, that's what they're going to do. But it's not just him; it's this whole clan. Ivanka coming out and calling herself, the MAGA queen, and calling them American patriots and the freaking, Confederate flags. This is not policy. This is not trying to change the direction democratically. This is about sedition,
So in the meanwhile, he confirmed that he will accept Joe Biden as the new president. He's still insisting that the election was a fraud. Yeah. Do you think there's more to come?
Yes, because as long as he is still saying he won the election, these people are empowered. The only thing, I mean, when I heard yesterday, when I heard Lindsey Graham and these people who I don't like anyways, but, you know, generally making really strong statements that what Trump needs to do is admit that he lost the election. Until he does that, whether it's tomorrow, 2 weeks, 2 years, 20 years, as long as he doesn't admit that, this core group of racist, Confederate, gun-waving nut jobs is going to be behind him.
Mm-hmm. As a digital analytics manager, you talked about fake news.
Yeah.
Which role plays social media like Facebook, WhatsApp, or Telegram in the mobilization of these masses, and also in bringing these populistic hate speech behavior among the people?
That's very tricky because, I mean, you have a competing interest there, which is freedom of speech. But I think when you're inciting violence like this, that's not right. And you shouldn't be allowed to use social media to coordinate illegal activities. And that's what they do. Now, how you root it out, whether you can actually find all these people in time, and this happened over the course of a week. That's a pretty short period of time to find how this is all being coordinated. But the fact that it used social media, I don't know that there's too much we can do about that. I mean, I think that Twitter has behaved more responsibly in the last couple months, but really this enabling of lies without any disclaimers or anything like that is really horrible. I think they could do a lot more in that space, but you do have to be careful about the competing interest of freedom of speech there. And there's no doubt in my mind that social media has emboldened this. You wouldn't have any of this without social media. You know, what are they going to do? Ride around on horse and buggy and tell each other what to do? You know, it's just not the way it works. But on the other hand, social media also allowed people to send out messages of support from Republicans like Lindsey Graham and Mike Pence and people like that, able to send out messages saying this is wrong too. You know, so the same technology, the very same messaging platforms that we use allowed them to coordinate going back to work last night and all that kind of stuff too. So I don't like to, obviously it's what I do for a living. I don't like to demonize technology, but I do think that there's more that we could do to make it accountable for content in some cases, particularly hate speech and things that are inciting violence like this.
Okay. You're living in Austria. What do you think about the situation here? There are also in Europe a lot of right-wing forces becoming stronger. Yeah. People gather on the streets, stand up against the corona restrictions, but walking along extreme right-wing people. Are you scared, or are you thinking that something like an attack on the parliament could be happening in Europe or in Vienna too, for example?
Yeah. I see protests here, and I obviously, you know, I've seen them get out of control, and I think it was in Berlin last month, or 2 months ago, whatever that was. But I don't see the leadership of this that we have in America, number one. And number two, it's not armed here. You know, it's not, it's loud, and you know, it is, you know, threatening, but it doesn't have the same level of fear in me that I would have, say, standing in front of that crowd, you know. But it, you know, never say never, you know. I mean, I think that's something that it doesn't, what it's based on, like what are they actually protesting against? Like here, I see people protesting for freedom to not wear masks, you know. Okay, well, the counter to that is logic, is you know, it's not just you, it's your neighbor, you know. I don't see a source of like fake news like we have in America that's just so loud, like a megaphone in your face all the time, of just lies. you know? I would say that in general, my experience with the media here has been one of, you know, fairly central. You know, it doesn't seem to be off the rails. You know, you don't have like a Tucker Carlson here on the news every night spreading lies, you know, on mainstream media. Now, maybe I'm just not in the right corners. Maybe it's because I don't, you know, watch a lot of German news or even German language news. But it feels more like the media's role has been to keep things relatively logical. And when someone is, you know, spewing lies, that's the headline. They're spewing lies, you know. I tell people about like what happened in with Strake in Ibiza. You know, it's like he said the wrong thing and it was clearly wrong. And in 2 weeks, he was gone. And yet in America, we have a system which is based on a constitution that doesn't allow that to happen, you know, and that gives me hope. You know, that gives me a feeling of like here, the change and the guardrails seem to be in a very different place. Although there is still some fear, obviously. You know, anytime you see people protesting the right to, you know, infect other people, of course it's going to be worrisome. Or you see people, you know, protesting, you know, racial things. You know, but on the other hand, the progressives here also have a very strong voice. You know, I went to a demonstration in Bregenz like 4 or 5 months ago, and it was a lot of people, you know, a lot of people talking about, you know, caring for other people and things like that. So I don't know. It's it just feels more civilized here.
Okay.
I mean, the equivalent would be like these guys in the picture behind you. They're like, you know, holding like, you know, okay, they got one American flag, but if you zoom out, there's probably a Confederate flag, you know? Well, you don't see those kinds of groups of people here with like swastikas or something, or, you know, old Republic flags and things like that. You don't see that as much here. I'm sure it exists somewhere, and I'm sure they do, but it's like, it's not considered to be viable discourse like it seems to be in America, you know? And that gives me a little bit of hope, at least.
Okay, yeah. Back to the America, land of the free. It was an attack on democracy. What do you think has Joe Biden in front of him? How can he close the gaps?
Part of me just wants to say, I don't give a shit. They don't need to close the gap. They need to do the right thing. Closing the gap is compromise. And I'm not going to compromise with somebody carrying a Confederate flag and telling me, you know, that, you know, all lives matter. You know, I don't have to compromise with fascists. We fought world wars over this, you know. But I think that to govern, to actually create legislation, to actually get things passed, that's hard work, you know. And I worked in government. I've been in politics a lot. And I know that even little things like creating a rule to put a sidewalk down somewhere is really difficult. And this is what has made the Trump presidency such a failure, is he put incompetent people everywhere who didn't want to do anything except advance their racist misogyny, you know, agenda. Whereas the actual work of building a country is hard. It takes people who like bureaucracy. It takes people who like, you know, crafting legislation, getting it to work legally and constitutionally and all that kind of stuff. That's what I think Joe Biden's going to do different. And what he has to do is get this country functioning again, because what we have is dysfunction now. And just getting it functioning again isn't going to be a lot of work. However, a lot of what Trump did was by executive order, signing his pen, you know. Well, not to quote Tom Waits, but the large print giveth and the small print taketh away, you know. I mean, what Trump did by executive order, Joe Biden can undo by executive order for the most part. You know, I think they have a long list of things they're going to do on day one. You know, the Paris Accord, you know, women's rights, you know, relief for refugees and things like that. These are all things that can be done by executive order and need to be done very quickly and without debate. Now, the hard work is the legislation, though. You know, the legislation about, relief for COVID and things like that. Some of that you can't do by executive order because it impacts budgets. And that's going to be hard work. I was so happy with the Georgia election, because that is going to at least allow them to put the smart people in place, but they need to fix the judiciary. They need to appoint a lot more judges. I'm a big fan of packing the Supreme Court, and I think we need to do whatever it takes to make the country functional again. Not so concerned about emotional compromise with people carrying Confederate flags.
Okay. So final question. What do you think will happen to Donald Trump when he's not president of the United States anymore?
Hopefully indictments. He is going to be subject to a lot more criminal prosecution when he's not president anymore. And I'm hoping that happens. The sexual assault cases from his past, the tax returns. He's going to be basically bankrupt if there's any justice in the world. So my hope is that he just becomes a sad old man walking the beaches of Florida. Yes, I would love to see him and his entire family go to jail, but I'm under no pretense that that's actually going to happen, really. Although I think Jared and Ivanka could. But he is a classic narcissist who exists only for power for himself. So the biggest punishment for him is to take that away. The biggest punishment is for him to be irrelevant, and his money can't buy relevancy anymore. And to me, that I just want him to go away in that regard, and I want the country to be healed. That will be revenge enough. Living well is the best revenge, they say, and the country needs to start living well.
Okay, thank you, Frank. Very interesting view on the topic, and I wish you a good time here in Austria.
Thank you. My pleasure. It was a pleasure to actually get to voice some of this stuff. So thank you.
Okay. Goodbye.
Thank you. Ciao.